Now jet planes line up in the sky. Pretty soon we all gon' die. Some of you people don't understand. Stop throwing your garbage in the street and use your can. Pollution. Pollution.
Bo Diddley pollution here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to New York Times reporter Charles Duhigg. For the past several months, he has been working on a series titled Toxic Waters, examining the worsening pollution in the nation's water systems. Charles Duhigg joined us last month to discuss how chemical companies have violated the Clean Water Act more than 500,000 times in the last 5 years. Most of the violations have gone unpunished, with state regulators taking significant action in just 3% of all cases. Since then, he has written articles focusing on how coal-fired power plants and large farms are threatening the nation's drinking water. The Times revealed that 313 coal-fired power plants have violated the Clean Water Act since 2004, but 90% of those plants were not fined or otherwise sanctioned. No federal regulations specifically govern the disposal of power plant discharges into waterways or landfills.
As for farms, runoff from all but the largest farms is essentially unregulated under the Clean Water Act. Agricultural runoff is the single largest source of water pollution in the nation's rivers and streams. Nearly 20 million Americans fall ill each year from waterborne parasites, viruses, or bacteria, including those stemming from human and animal waste. Well, Charles Duhigg of the New York Times joins us here in our Firehouse studio. We welcome you to Democracy Now!
Thank you so much for
Your
having me.
articles are also supported by an editorial today in the New York Times about the significance of the 1972 Clean Water Act, how it has to be improved, and the significance of your pieces. Start off by talking about Allegheny Energy, the coal-fired plant in Masontown, Pennsylvania.
This is one of the largest for a long time, one of the dirtiest coal-fired power plants in the United States. And over the last couple of years, we've made great advances in how we clean air pollution. So Allegheny, this plant, which is called Hatfield's Ferry, as well as a number of other plants across the nation, have installed these things called scrubbers. And what scrubbers are is it's basically they spray water and chemicals through the chimneys and take out a lot of the air pollution before it escapes into the sky. The problem is that when you spray that stuff in there and sort of the water and the pollution collects at the bottom, you have to do something with it. And what we found is that increasingly that pollution and waste is being dumped into nearby rivers and lakes, or is being put into large ponds or landfills where it can also seep through the ground into drinking water supplies. So what the concern is that we're moving pollution perhaps just from the air to the water, and we're not really solving the problem as robustly as the nation should.
But then in terms of being able to regulate these plants in terms of water discharges, what has the federal government done?
Well, the federal government, there are solutions out there. There's systems called zero discharge emission systems that would prevent any pollution from making it into the water or the air. But the federal government has not created any rules for power plants, and this has been a big issue. Way back in 2000, the EPA was poised and in fact had drafted a rule to specially regulate pollution, water pollution, and other types of pollution from power plants. But the energy industry pushed back pretty significantly. That rule was shelved, and there's been no rules designed for power plants since then. Now, Lisa Jackson, who's the new head of the EPA under President Obama, has said that by the end of this year, she will issue new rules on water pollution from power plants, and that she's going to make a determination whether the the waste that comes out of power plants should be considered hazardous waste. If it's considered hazardous waste, a whole new set of rules will be applied to it. But as for right now, there's no special rules for power plants.
You write that only 1 in 43 power plants across the nation must limit how much barium that they dump into nearby waterways. Talk about the significance of barium, and that 90% of hundreds of coal-fired power plants have violated the Clean Water Act and were not fined or otherwise sanctioned. But start with the barium.
That's exactly right. Barium is a chemical. The waste from power plants is essentially what is left over when you burn coal. And as we all know, coal is a relatively dirty mineral. It's very dense. When you burn it, a lot of bad stuff comes off, a lot of minerals, barium, arsenic, other minerals. Barium is one that the government has said causes health problems. It can affect your organs. It can cause skin rashes and other problems. Arsenic is another mineral that we see a lot in the byproduct, the waste from coal. Because the Clean Water Act doesn't say you must limit certain types of chemicals, a lot of power plants emit barium, arsenic, and other things, but there's no limit in the law on how much they can put out. And so as a result, they can essentially dump as much as they want into nearby rivers, and power plants are usually by rivers because they need a lot of water to produce energy. Now, the point that you raised is that a lot of regulators have tried to use the Clean Water Act to regulate and rein in the pollution, the water pollution that comes out of power plants. But the Clean Water Act, like any law, is only as good as you enforce it. And what we found by looking at our records, and we had built this big database, was that hundreds and hundreds of plants have violated their Clean Water Act permit and have never been punished for it. Or if they have been punished, they've been punished at the tune of a couple $1,000s or maybe $20,000, when these are firms that bring in billions of dollars in profits.
You mentioned arsenic, and in some cases you found in Ohio and North Carolina that there were releases of arsenic as much as 18 times above federal limits?
Well, actually, this comes from EPA data, and what they found was that near landfills where power plants have dumped the waste from generating electricity, arsenic has seeped into the groundwater. And you're exactly right. Sometimes the level of arsenic detected in the groundwater was 18 times higher than the federal limit. They said that for some populations, they were at an exposed cancer risk that was 2,000 times higher than what EPA says we should be exposed to.
That's an EPA report itself.
That's EPA data, right?
Says that